Wonderful, and welcome to Family Equality Council's um, a webinar on family building or maybe baby. It's one of three sessions that we're having, and tonight we are very honored to have a panel of experts in the maybe baby field, in the family building field. So we are going to start tonight's session off with Ms. Kristine French with an adoption center. Take it away, Kristine.
Thank you, Tatiana. My name is Kristine French. I'm an adoption coordinator at the Independent Adoption Center in the Atlanta, Georgia office. I've worked with the agency since 2007 in a number of capacities. I tell people all the time I absolutely love my job. There's nothing better than building families. One thing that I'm extremely proud of regarding the Independent Adoption Center is that we have never had exclusionary policies. So the IAC has never turned away families based on age, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, marital status, religion, ethnic background, race, color, or creed. And it's something that I'm very proud of, as is the agency. We have been doing adoptions for over 30 years and have completed 4,000 successful adoptions. We are a nationwide agency, so I'm in the Atlanta, Georgia office. We have an office in Tampa, Atlanta, Raleigh, North Carolina, New York, Indianapolis, Indiana, Houston, Texas, Concord, California, and Los Angeles, California. We assist families with the entire process of adoption. So a family comes to our agency. They go through a 2-day training course in which we teach them about the process of the home study, the items that they'll need to collect, how the process works, different things that we look for in the home study, and we would write their home study for them. Another piece of what we do is we help them write what's called an adoption letter. So we are a fully open adoption agency. So birth moms call us to complete an intake, and based on the information that we gather from her, your letter or family's letters would be sent out. And so every family is required to have a 1-800 number and an email address for birth mom to contact them, and they will have ongoing communication with her. And in the adoption field, we call it matching. So at the point in which the birth mother chooses a family that she'd like to place her baby with, we would match the family and the birth mother. There's lots of services that occur at the matching stage. So we have what's called a match meeting, where we talk about expectations, about ongoing contact. We ask all of our adoptive families to be open to at least one in-person visit a year. We look at the child from age birth until 1, and then we look at ages 2 through 18, where everybody comes together, sits around a table, and talks about what their thoughts and ideas are, what the expectations are. We have what's called a birth and tentative hospital plan, where birth mom and adoptive families sit down and talk about how they would like the experience at the hospital to be. Does birth mom want the adoptive family in the delivery room with her? Does she want them to cut the cord? Does she want them to room in with her? Would she rather have the baby in the nursery? All of those pieces, really, we want to know what birth mom wants and adoptive family wants, and we all come together and make an agreement about how that will look. Typically, discharge happens at the hospital, where we would come and take relinquishments, and the adoptive family leaves the hospital with the baby. If the family is in Georgia or one of an IAC state, so one of the states where we have an office, we would then conduct the post-placement visits according to the state guidelines. And we don't have attorneys on staff, but we have a list of attorneys that we refer families to, obviously, that can help with, and now because of I think it was the June ruling, now our same-sex families can adopt together instead of separately, or a second parent adoption, as well as when we write the home study, both parents are listed on the home study. So it's to include everybody in the family. We are very transparent. We have our statistics are listed on our website, adoptionhelp.org. You can look at the types of birth moms that call in and their situations. We have birth parent stats page. We have the number of matches and births that we have every month. We have our average wait time, which I believe is right around 18 months. And then it breaks it down to family type. So same-sex families, hetero families, singles. It'll show their wait time as well. And I think all of our same-sex families are right around the average wait time of 18 months. And I think there might be some families that might be a little bit less. We also have a sliding fee scale, and our fees are listed on our website. So based on your annual income would determine how much you would pay. We have join fees, and then we have a match fee or a birth parent services fee and a birth fee. The two last fees are due towards the end when you match and the birth of the child. So I guess that's kind of the Independent Adoption Center in a nutshell. So I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kristine. We'll go ahead and handle the questions afterwards.
Okay, fabulous.
So thank you so much. Next up, we're going to have Denise, who's actually part of the Family Equality Council on our policy team. Denise, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how our families are affected by policy.
Sure. Thanks. So as Toddy said, I'm Denise Brogan Cater. I'm the state policy director for Family Equality Council, and we have a lot of we see a lot of families that go through various family formation avenues. And I think the things that I want to make clear is that the landscape has changed somewhat significantly since the Obergefell opinion in June, which made marriage equality legal nationwide. All of our families now have access to joint adoption if they are legally married. Now, that's not saying that we advocate or recommend marriage. That's a personal choice that each family has to make on their own. But if you're married, every state now has the ability to legally adopt. This is important for two reasons. And we also recommend very strongly that you consult with a local LGBT-aware attorney in your area, because the laws vary state by state. In most states, if you are in a different sex married relationship, when a woman gives birth, her husband is automatically listed as the second parent or father on the birth certificate. It is our position that now that marriage equality has come, if a married woman gives birth, then her spouse should be listed as the second parent on the birth certificate. Now, birth certificate is important indicia or indicator of parentage, but it is not actually what we say in the legal world is dispositive of parentage. It doesn't prove parentage, it just indicates parentage. So it's important to get a second parent adoption or a joint adoption, even though it's your own child and it's frustrating and annoying and invasive and sometimes expensive. And so it's important, again, to work with a local attorney. The second thing about adoptions is that the marital presumption, if you live in a state where the marital presumption works for you and your name is listed on the birth certificate, but you then travel out of state for some reason to a state that doesn't recognize that marital presumption, your parentage may be legally in question, and a parentage adoption order, parentage order will then protect you fully. If you are creating your family through surrogacy, then you're going to need to have an attorney anyway, because you're going to need to go through the legal process in order to recognize the intended parents as the legal parents regardless. And so in that case, you'll naturally get both names on the birth certificate. When you engage with a firm to do an adoption or surrogacy contract, I can't stress enough how important it is to consult with a local LGBT-aware attorney and make sure that you don't sign certain documents that say you're giving up your rights, for example, to your child in order for both parents to be able to adopt, because that's not necessary. In some states that used to be, and that used to be a way that we could work around the laws to get second parent adoptions, but it's not necessary any longer. So be careful that you don't sign such a thing. I really think that covers the bulk of the things that I wanted to say around the legal implications and ramifications of family formation in the post-Obergefell world. As always, you can reach us at familyequalitycouncil.org, and you can even email me directly at denisebk@familyequality.org, and I can answer any specific questions that you might have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Denise. All right, next up is going to be Dr. Massey with Servy, Massey Fertility Institute in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Massey, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the services that you offer? Oh. Kelly, can you help us out? I think he's muted. Oh, we're having some technical difficulties. Oh, no, unfortunately, I don't know that his microphone is working. Oh, now you're muted again.
It looks like his microphone is not working properly. That is something that appeared to happen earlier when he joined our previous call.
Yeah.
1 second.
We believe you have one.
Oh,
there
we
he
goes. One.
Okay. Okay, well, we hope that he comes back and he's able to join us. Sometimes you gotta love technology. So on that note, let's go ahead and move on to Scott Brown with California Cryo Bank.
Hi. Is my microphone working? You guys can get me? All right, great.
Yes, you're good.
Good. Thank you. My name is Scott Brown. I am the Director of Client Experience for California Cryo Bank. We are a full-service donor sperm bank located in Los Angeles, California. We have branches all over the country: New York, Boston, Northern California, and Houston very recently. And our goal is to help all families, LGBT or otherwise, around the world start their families through the use of donor sperm, and very soon actually donor frozen eggs as well. But our primary business has been providing donor sperm since 1977 to help tens of thousands of families get started. And I actually have a slideshow which I will use. I generally just talk about sperm without using slides, but I thought it might be helpful in this environment. And I can talk for like hours on sperm too, so forgive me if I ramble. But I'm going to do my screen share here. And this will give you a little more information about California Cryo Bank and using donor sperm in general. I am screen sharing. You guys getting this? All right, great. So, starting your family using donor sperm. My slide's going to change here. There we go. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the donor screening and selection process, the recruiting process, the different types of vials that you can purchase, you can talk to your doctor about, the different types of donor information that you find, and then also managing donor offspring limits, because if people have a lot of questions generally about how many other children out there will be half-siblings to their siblings if they use through anonymous donor sperm. So donor recruitment. So the majority of national sperm banks, being California Cryo Bank, Zytex, Fairfax, Sperm Bank of California, European Sperm Bank, all have basically the same general criteria. The donors have to be in good health. In California Cryobank's case specifically, are students and young professionals. They need to be graduated from or enrolled in a 4-year university. We recruit from universities around the country like Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Columbia, UCLA, USC. Students also are recently graduated and professionals ranging from physicians, lawyers, sommeliers. I don't know if we still have. We had a sommelier at one point, so I thought it was cool, so it made it onto the slide. Musicians, physicists, you name it, our donors have done it or are doing it. In terms of specimen quality, they're screened for count, motility, and morphology. Count would be the volume or the amount of sperm that they produce. Motility would be what percentage of their sperm are good swimmers, and morphology would be the actual shape of the sperm themselves. In California Cryobank's case, we can be pretty picky. We actually accept less than 1% of our applicants. Due to the fact that we have labs all over the country and we get tens of thousands of applications, we can be very picky and also sort of add a subjective level to our screening as well, that if the donor is difficult to work with or, strikingly unattractive for some disfigurement or some reason, or we somehow find sort of like a creepiness factor that sometimes comes up, that we have the ability and our donor coordinators have the ability to sort of allow their sixth sense to kick in and eliminate those donors from consideration. As I said, less than 1% of the applicants pass the screening process. Now, these specific requirements we're going over are specific to California Cryobank, but all sperm banks share the same general type of criteria. Height, weight, education. We do general health screenings. We do STD testing, physical exams. That STD testing will continue throughout their time as a donor in the program to make sure that they don't acquire anything that wasn't there at the beginning of their donor cycling. We do genetic testing as well, looking for genetic mutations that occur most frequently in the general population, things like cystic fibrosis, spinal muscular atrophy, sickle cell anemia, thalassemia. We do a chromosome analysis to make sure that the chromosome pairings are normal. We look at a 3-generation family medical history review, so we understand the donor's parents, grandparents, as well as siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins, looking for any history that would suggest a higher risk of a genetic issue being passed on to any offspring. That would be early onset heart disease, certain forms of cancer, and other genetic issues. We also ask our donors to fill out a ton of donor information. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And we also have that subjective review by the CCB staff. So there are different types of sperm donors and sperm banks that you can choose from, and I think it's important to sort of identify for yourself what you are really looking for. Now there is, with California Cryobank, they have a specific anonymous sperm donor program that's sort of exactly what you expect it to be. We recruit the donors, we make them available to our clients, and then once those children eventually turn 18, they have the option of contacting us to try and reach out to the donor, but the donor has made no specific promise or commitment to respond to that contact. Now that's really what the entire industry has been built around for years and years and years, and we tend to get a fairly high percentage of donors being willing to be contacted. It usually remains anonymous and is facilitated by us, but they're often willing and able to answer questions, answer an email, answer a handwritten letter. It all goes through us back and forth to protect both parties' privacy and anonymity. Perhaps by the time your children are born, it'll be a hologram or some other form of cool communication. We also offer an open donor program at California Cryobank, and it's basically the same as the anonymous program, except at the time of donation, the donors are expressing an openness and willingness for at least one contact with any offspring who requests it once they turn 18. So that contact remains anonymous. It is facilitated by California Cryobank, and we will stay in the middle of that relationship back and forth as long as both parties are interested. Now, in both the cases of the anonymous and the open donor, if the child and donor want to take their relationship sort of offline and beyond us, we're all for that. We just want to make sure that everybody is on the same page and is willing to do so before information is exchanged. Now, there are other sperm banks out there who offer an ID release program, and that's exactly what it sounds like. When the child turns 18, rather than simply being put in contact through the sperm bank, they actually get the donor's last known contact information. Now, this in some ways seems very positive and exciting for people because it suggests that they'll have the opportunity to meet the donor. However, our concern with that type of program is that if a donor is not interested in being contacted, as we do in our open and anonymous programs, that we don't know that it's the best idea in the world for your child or the donor to have that contact forced upon him. We don't want kids showing up on people's doorsteps and being either openly rejected or having some kind of confrontation, or jeopardizing the donor's own personal life and family and privacy. That tends to set up some pretty high expectations and can lead to some really difficult and troubling results. And so we don't offer that program, but it is out there. And if it's something that's important to you, you should do your research with the sperm banks to find out what donors on their catalog do offer that option. Then, of course, there's the known or directed donor path. And this would be using a sperm donor who is personally known to you. Now, that donor can be a friend, a relative, somebody you meet specifically for the purposes of using him as a sperm donor. Whatever that process is, there's certainly pros and cons. There can be some interesting sharing of parental duties and co-parenting that can occur. There can be some great situations for having an additional male role model in your child's life. There can be a lot of positives that go along with it. I do like to make sure people are aware and are very conscious of, in this decision-making process, that there's other things that go along with this grand idea of what this donor will be. You really, really need to have that donor medically worked up, just like an anonymous donor would be, being screened for the STDs, perhaps having a genetic history done to make sure that he's not carrying a recessive trait that possibly you're carrying as well. Understanding that he's completely aware of what's going on and his level of involvement with that child moving forward. You need to consult an attorney. He has to have his own attorney as well. You need to set up parental rights, responsibilities, and obligations and have that very clearly stated. You want to make sure that you protect the rights of your child and your family long term. People's expectations don't always match up with what the reality of the situation becomes. And in many cases, a donor comes into the process expecting to be one thing, and then once that child's born, his priorities change, or his interest level changes, or your interest in him changes. Donors also bring with them families, and if that donor has a parent, a mom or a dad, who views your child as their grandchild, they may want to be more involved in your child's life than you were expecting. All this kind of stuff needs to be discussed ahead of time, and a good family attorney can help you do that. They'll ask questions you never even considered asking and make sure that everybody is on the same page and understands what they're getting into beforehand, because these are very difficult, emotionally trying, and ultimately expensive discussions to have on the backside. So I really always stress for people, please, please, please make sure you do your homework and talk to an attorney if you're going to use a known donor. Any situation you've ever heard of in the media, be it a state going after a donor, Kansas going after the donor for child support, or custody battles, or any issues like that, always occur because, one, it's a known donor, and two, because the couple or families did not take the time to dot all their I's and cross all their T's and protect themselves. It can be done. There are laws and guidelines in place to support what you want to do with your family, but you have to be very clear on what you want and make sure you put the right things in place to protect you. As you start this process, if you're going to go through a sperm bank, most banks offer two types of vials, an IUI, or a washed vial, or an ICI, an unwashed vial. The IUI is a vial where the sperm has been put through a wash process that clears out all the dead cells, most of the seminal fluid, white blood cells, all the stuff that your body would naturally filter out at the cervix. What happens in an IUI insemination is a catheter will be inserted all the way up into the uterus directly, and the sperm will be deposited right outside the fallopian tube. It puts it really close to the sperm, and puts it really close to where the egg is going to find the sperm and hope for conception. If you don't clean out all that extra tissue and gunk that comes along, it creates serious cramping and other potential issues. What your body naturally does in a traditional conception is the ejaculate will have all this extra material in it, and that will help guide the good sperm up through the cervix and into the uterus. But you don't need it all when you're already depositing sperm right there. An ICI, or an unwashed vial, will maintain most of that seminal fluid and other particles, which will then act almost like a natural ejaculate if you're doing an at-home insemination and inserting at the cervix, and will allow the good sperm a chance to make it all the way up into the uterus. It's a long trip. It doesn't sound like it's very far, but for a sperm, that's like going from like Los Angeles to San Francisco. Like, it's a big, long trip. So you want to do everything you can to optimize the opportunity for those good, healthy sperm to make it all the way up. In some situations, a physician will prefer you to purchase an unwashed vial and do the wash themselves in their lab. That's perfectly fine. That's okay. If you're going to go through an IVF procedure where you're going to have an egg retrieval done, the sperm will be introduced to the egg in a laboratory setting, embryos will be created, and then the embryos are transferred back into the uterus. In that situation, they're going to do a wash no matter what vial type you use. There'll be an additional wash. You can use either one. We tend to produce much more IUI vials than ICI vials due to demand. We produce more washed than unwashed. And so sometimes someone will find a donor, they're planning to do an IVF cycle, and all we'll have is the washed specimen. That's totally fine. Doesn't matter. There's plenty of sperm there. Some banks also offer a low volume specimen, meaning there's just less sperm there that's specifically intended for IVF. We actually used 2 years ago. We stopped doing that, and basically we now use those sort of leftover bits of sperm, leftover vials that would create a small vial. We just top off our regular vials now because it just was very hard to maintain those consistently, and it was better for us to put more sperm in the other vials. But some banks still prefer offer those types of vials as well. Donor information. Am I rambling? Tatiana, okay, all right, good. Donor information. So one of the interesting things that's occurred in the sperm donor industry over really the last 10 or 15 years is a complete shift from servicing primarily heterosexual couples to now servicing primarily lesbian couples and single mothers by choice. And in doing so, some of the interests of our clients have changed. Back in the day, it used to be that you really cared about the donor's physical appearance, his ethnic background, and possibly his blood type, because you were trying to substitute for a husband in the relationship, and oftentimes the child was never even going to be informed that they were donor conceived. So it's really more about what the donor was, not who the donor was. Well, as times have changed, and now 80% of our clients are lesbian couples and single mothers by choice, what they're looking for in a donor sometimes is very different. They're really more interested in who this donor is as an individual. I can list 5 or 6 donors who all seem on paper to be fairly similar, height, weight, eye color, hair color, but one of them's a poet, or one of them's an athlete, or one of them has a PhD, or one of them loves to cook, or one of them loves to swim, or has a great relationship with his grandmother that he values. All these types of different forms of information and facts and figures and hopes and dreams and talents and aspirations all become very information to actually provide all this information in sort of concise, clean, fun way to help people understand exactly what it is they're looking for. So in our case, we offer essays, staff impressions of the donor, which would include, an actual written assessment of the donor, sort of like what he's like as a human being, and a little blurb about maybe his style or his the way he dresses. And this is from the point of view of somebody who actually met the donor for you. We have the profiles they fill out, which have short answer information, stuff about likes and dislikes, favorite foods, hobbies, vacations, things like that. We provide childhood photos, which you'll see a series of photos of the donor starting at usually 1 or 2 years old up through 11 or 12. We have a donor conversation, which would be an actual audio interview with the donor. You get to hear his voice, and in a lot of ways, this is really the most sort of intimate piece of information we provide, because you get to sort of get a sense of who he is, and warmth and intelligence and sense of humor, and a lot of things that are tough to come through on the written page, but when you hear them live, it actually makes it much more interesting. The Express Yourself is basically an art project. We give them a blank sheet of paper and say, give me something that makes you a unique individual. What is it about you that's special? And sometimes that can be an art project or an essay they write, or if they're a musician, we can actually have recorded music there for you to hear. Facial feature reports. It's basically like a police sketch artist breakdown of what, the shape of the donor's eyes and his nose and his forehead and his attached or detached earlobes, things like that. We also offer donor matching consultations, so that if you had a specific picture of a spouse or a relative or an individual you wanted the donor to look like, we can help you actually match the donor's adult photo or adult likeness to that individual. And then finally, we can offer genetic consultations. So if you have a genetic history within your family, or you're a known carrier or something, and you have some concerns, we can either do additional testing on the donor, or we can talk about the risks associated with the donor's ethnic background matching your background and what we can do to sort of minimize the risk of passing on that genetic mutation to your child as well. As I said earlier, most banks offer some form of this stuff. I think we actually do it better and more interesting, but that's just me. But we really want it to be there not only to help you select your donor, but when you have the conversation with your child when they're 2 or 3 years old or however early you start, having these types of things there tangibly to show the child and help them understand that this is not just this random figment of their imagination. This was a real human being who was someone who's very important to their lives. Having this information to help sort of get a sense of who they are. And once you report your pregnancy to us, we actually send you a keepsake packet that has hard copies of all this information. So it doesn't matter if you lose your computer or it gets upgraded and that kind of stuff. So we want you to always have the information, and we're always here to send it to you again if it ever gets lost or destroyed. Managing offspring limits. So basically, California Cryo Bank's been very conscious of this issue for many, many years. And as a result, when you go to places like the Donor Sibling Registry or other public sites, you'll see that we don't have these issues of 75 or 100 offspring per donor. Our maximum family unit policy is 25 to 30 family units worldwide. The average is probably closer to 12 or 15 family units per donor. And we do distribute to every state in the U.S. almost on a daily basis and 65 or 70 countries around the world. We make it very easy to report your pregnancy. That also helps us maintain these limits. However, we don't rely on pregnancy reporting since it is optional. We have a whole formula that we take into account the number of vials that it takes on average per successful pregnancy, number of spontaneous losses, the number of vials used per insemination on average, and all this stuff kind of goes together, and we come up with a number that we lock into. As we monitor pregnancies, if it turns out that we believe a donor will hit his maximum and still have vials available, we would then restrict those vials for sibling use only. However, please don't rely on that. If you are planning on having more than one child, it's really critically important that you purchase and store those vials as soon as they're available. I'm going to take my screen off here, get back to my face. How do I do that? I go here, and I go here.
You're all set already.
Oh, I'm all set? Uh-oh. I just did something crazy. What did I do?
Just unshare. There you go.
Okay, good. So it's just me now. Okay. So one of the critical factors here is if you're planning on having more than one child, it's really important to store those vials while they're available. Donors obviously run out, sell out, and we limit the number we distribute on each one. So we get calls on a daily basis of people contacting us saying, I had my child 2 years ago and she's amazing and now we're ready for number 2, but it looks like you're out of that donor. What do I do? And I don't really have an answer for that. And so what's really important is sort of plan ahead, understand what your goals are, look at how old you are, how old you're going to be for your second or third pregnancy, if you're considering IVF now, if you're going to be doing IUIs, at-home inseminations. All these different factors come into play. And if your goal is to have 3 children and you're 25 years old, then you probably will need 10 vials of sperm. But if your goal is to have 3 children and you're 38 years old, I would recommend that you talk to your physician about going straight to IVF, and in which case you really only need 1 vial of sperm, and you can spend your money on the IVF, increasing your chances and having embryos on the side waiting for you frozen. So some of the factors, I rambled, I know I threw a lot out there. Cryobank.com or contact us by phone, and we're happy to always answer questions, and I can take questions here if it works out. So I apologize for rambling, but that's all I got. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Thank you so much, Scott. That was a wealth of information, and I liked also that you touched upon some of the policy and being able to do our family planning and considering how to protect our families too. That's super important for us. So thank you so much.
Sure.
Clearly, you're passionate about your job, so that's awesome. Now, next up, we've got Miss Erica Byers. She's with Growing Generations.
Hi everyone, I'm Erica, and I am the president at Growing Generations, and I've been working in surrogacy for 12 years now. It was sort of my career out of college, and it stuck because much like some of the other folks who talk, making babies is a pretty fun thing to do on a daily basis. So a little bit about me, and then I'm going to talk about the surrogacy and egg donation process and growing generation specifically. I am a mom of 2 boys. My husband's a transgender man, so we went through the sperm donor process, which Scott just so eloquently walked us through. And so I've been through sort of some version of what many of you are probably contemplating going through. Surrogacy is a really great option for creating a family if you're missing 1 or 2 of the ingredients needed to make a baby. So I sort of like to break it down into a recipe, and this is sort of how I talk to my young kids about how babies are made, and it takes 3 ingredients: a sperm, an egg, and a womb. And if you're missing the egg or the womb piece, surrogacy and egg donation is a great option. So I have some slides here I'm going to share. So bear with me 1 minute here while I share my screen. Okay. Okay, can you all see that? Tati, is that working?
Yes, you're good.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so what is surrogacy? How does it work? So really simply, surrogacy and egg donation is a collaboration of people coming together to help someone to become a parent. So there are many players involved. So there's a surrogate, intended parents, sperm, egg donor, doctor, lawyer, usually an agency involved, psychologist, and of course lots of family support from all of those folks who are embarking on the process. And really when everyone comes to the table, the surrogate, the donor, they're sort of educated and screened to make sure that their sort of number 1 goal in mind is to help someone become a parent. Okay. So generally speaking, there are 2 types of surrogacy that exist. So if you do some research, you will probably hear about both of these. The first is called traditional surrogacy, and traditional surrogacy was sort of the original type of surrogacy that existed. And the way that works is that's where you have a surrogate who is also using her own eggs. Okay, so typically the way that pregnancy is achieved is through insemination. Sometimes it can be IVF as well. So that was really the main type of surrogacy that existed probably until, I would say, the early 2000s. And at that point, gestational surrogacy really became the more popular option. Gestational surrogacy is when you have a surrogate who's carrying the child, and then you have an egg donor who is different from the surrogate. Pregnancy is achieved via in vitro fertilization in that case. And the surrogate's obviously not genetically related to the child. This method's become more popular in recent years because, first of all, it's easier to find women who either want to be a surrogate or want to be an egg donor. It's a little harder to come by women who want to do both. And oftentimes the characteristics that you would look for in a surrogate are different than the characteristics you would look for in an egg donor. And I'm going to sort of talk about what some of those are. So I want to talk a little bit about surrogates, where we find surrogates, what they're like. So surrogates are women who have had children of their own, and they really enjoyed pregnancy and had easy, healthy pregnancies. They have to have strong support networks around them because pregnancy is not always easy. Sometimes there are medical restrictions, bed rest, and we want to make sure that surrogates have adequate support during the process. They're obviously physically and emotionally healthy, and they go through a screening process to confirm that. We always want to make sure our surrogates at Growing Generations are financially secure, and this is something that's unique to our program. There are lots of different surrogacy agencies across the country, and we're sort of known for having one of the most stringent screening processes in the industry for our surrogates. And we think it's really important that our surrogates are financially secure because, you know, you don't want that added stress during pregnancy. And, you know, we also don't want intended parents to ever be in a position where they feel obligated to, pay their surrogate more money in the middle of a pregnancy because she's having trouble making ends meet. Our surrogates are good communicators, and in this day and age with all the technology options, a lot of times surrogates will live in a different place than the intended parents. That's very common. But with FaceTime and Skype, intended parents can be involved as involved as they'd like to be. And obviously we want to make sure our surrogates are responsible, meaning they don't use drugs, alcohol excessively, they don't smoke, they don't have criminal backgrounds. And really the most important thing is that they really want to help someone become a parent. Okay, so a lot of people ask, why do surrogates want to do this? Why would someone want to carry a baby for someone else? And really it's a healthy mix of narcissism and altruism. I mean, for a lot of our surrogates, this is an incredibly generous thing that they can do for somebody else that not a lot of people can or want to do. And they're typically philanthropic by nature. They tend to be, very involved in their kids' life, volunteering their time, and involved in their communities. And it's interesting, we have a lot of surrogates who return to our program because when they, hand the child to the parents for the first time, and they get to see that look on their face, it's sort of, a little bit addicting, and they maybe want to do it again. In terms of relationships with surrogates, intended parents and surrogates often have friendly relationships during pregnancy. They communicate frequently to talk about what's going on in the pregnancy, how things are progressing, and oftentimes that relationship continues post-birth, and on average it looks like maybe 1 or 2 contacts a year via email with some pictures on how the family is doing and that sort of thing. The great thing about that is most surrogates are happy to, if your child ever expresses interest in meeting the surrogate or knowing more about her, they're happy to be involved in those conversations. So real quickly on egg donors and who they are. Egg donors are women who are younger, between the ages of 21 and 30. They go through a screening process to ensure they're genetically healthy and general good health history. And when you have an opportunity to choose a donor, you actually get a login to a database, and you get to see photos of the egg donors, you get to see video interviews of the egg donors, and we provide that because we want you to really get a good sense of what the donor is like, and we also want you to have that material to share with your child should you choose to when they're a little bit older. As Scott talked a little bit about anonymous donors versus identity release donors. And egg donation works very similarly. There's a lot of women who prefer to remain anonymous, and there are other women who are happy to have contact when the child reaches the age of 18. So egg donation in that sense works very similarly. And ultimately, donors are sort of see this as a gift they can give to someone else, and there's no doubt a financial benefit that they receive as well, which is attractive to a lot of younger women. Okay. So the cost of surrogacy with an egg donor, the cost you should expect is between $150,000 and $210,000, and this is no doubt one of the biggest barriers to people choosing surrogacy to create their family. And the one bit of advice I like to give when it comes to the financials is, as you will inevitably come across lots of other agencies, and some of them list prices as low as $50,000 to $80,000 in cost. But just be really careful, because oftentimes those agencies are omitting costs that you will incur. So, for example, they will leave out the medical costs because you're going to be paying that directly to the doctor, so they're not listing it as a cost, or the attorney's fees. Attorneys are a very important part of the surrogacy process, and you will incur those fees. So just sort of a word of warning, we have a great cost estimator on our website, and I encourage you can take that and you can compare that to any agency where you're researching, and if there's any sort of expense item missing, you can always ask questions of that agency and say, hey, should I expect this expense, or will this not be part of the process? So that's a little bit about sort of the players and the cost, but in terms of how it all unfolds, just quickly going to walk.
Ooh, Erica, did we lose you?
It does seem like she locked up.
Oh no.
1 second.
Okay.
That's me. Yeah, she has lost her connection.
Okay.
So,
Well.
if we want to go back to questions.
Yeah, we've got a couple questions that came in, and hopefully Erica will be able to jump on. We are wrapping up at 9 o'clock, so we've got a couple more minutes. And like I said, hopefully Erica can jump on with us. Scott, question for you from California Cryo. What's the average age of couples or individuals that you're seeing now that are starting a family?
That's actually a really good question that I've never been asked. I think the average age for our lesbian couples is going down, which is actually a good thing in terms of fertility. That means that women are making the decision to start their families younger, and obviously there's a better opportunity because age is such a huge factor in fertility. We also, when you figure the average for overall for our clients, the single mothers by choice tend to be older, more sort of accomplished in their careers and farther along in life, and are sort of reaching the decision to start families on their own as a result of not having found the person they wanted to start a family with on their own earlier on in life, and so before the clock runs out, they're switching over to this plan B. And in terms of heterosexual couples, it ranges. They tend to be a little bit older, but I would say overall our average age of our average client is probably in the early to mid-30s.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm assuming too now with marriage equality, we're going to see, that age is going to keep on, coming down. So very exciting with that.
In terms of fertility, it is definitely important if you're planning on starting a family that you can do some. We didn't have the doctor get to speak, but there's certain factors that are good indicators of how successful you will or won't be, and simple blood work and simple tests can really tell you a lot, and most insurance will cover that simple blood work, and even if it doesn't, it's like $100. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and it's really important before you start spending money on sperm and other procedures and lawyers and all the other things that we're talking about to really make sure that you have an opportunity to become pregnant if there's an issue, and most of these issues, or many of these issues, can be treated and are very simple with their fallopian tubes being blocked or other small issues, hormone levels, things of that nature. Do your due diligence and make sure you're in good health and in good, not just physical health, but reproductive health, and your body is ready to get pregnant, because you don't want to spend all this money on sperm and shipping and everything else only to find out it was never going to work anyway.
Awesome. Thank you so much for bringing up those points. Kristine, quick question for you when it comes to adoption. Do you think it is better for LGBTQ couples to adopt domestically or internationally?
I'm not an expert on international adoption, but I do think there are some restrictions in regards to same-sex families adopting internationally, and again, it doesn't facilitate openness, which of course is something that I think is very important in an adoption.
And one more question for the adoption topic does it take longer for LGBTQ couples to adopt than heterosexual couples?
All of our statistics are with our same-sex male couples. I think they're a little bit shorter wait time than the average, which is right around 18 months right now. And I believe lesbian couples are right at the average of 18 months. So no longer, which is good.
And then also, too, we have to keep in mind that I'm assuming different states have different rules, correct?
Well, yes, and this is some of this is a little bit of uncharted territory. Now, there's only been a few states before marriage equality that we had concern about, and hopefully that won't be the case. But like I said, some of this is a little bit new, and we haven't had some families adopt in certain states where they've been a little bit more discriminatory in the past. So time will tell, I think, for some of that too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I just got a message from Erica. Unfortunately, she's not able to jump back on. So with that, I just really wanted to thank all our experts, being able to take the time and share this information with us. And also to thank everyone that, took the time to listen to all this information, either if you're joining us live now or viewing this on a webinar. Like I said earlier, this is our actual part 1 of 3. So this is our, maybe baby sessions and being able to help LGBTQ individuals with the family building process. So thank you everyone so much for your time, and I hope that you have a wonderful evening. That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.